Tēnā te tō pai ere ki te tēnā te tō ārai e ki tō e hai. Tēnei te pau tū āpā, tēnei te pau tū ārai, tēnei te pau karia e hai. Kauparia ki uta, kauparia ki tai. Huakina maira te rā. Huakina maira o whare. Huaina tō whare ko hiringa nuku, ko hiringa rangi. Huaina tō whare ko hiringa te kōrero, ko te hiringa te wānanga. Ko hiringa tau, ko hiringa take, ki te whaiau ki te ao marama. Tihei mauri tū, mauri ora ki te whaiau ki te ao marama. Tihei mauri ora. Ka tira o e tiwi. Witi rere atu rā te reo, kāro nui. Ki te hunga pā heke wai. Rātou kua riro ki tua o te ārai. Rātou kua rōnaki atu rā i te korokoro o te parata, te hoki mai ai. Tēnei hoki rā te tangi, angi te koromaki o tō nui o tō rai. Ana i mākuia mara i au koutou ki tēnei a wawatea. Haere koutou, maunga i te ara numi, ki te huhunga o te kahurangi, ki te huhunga anō hoki, ki te hunga takapō, pō nui, pō roa, pōti atu ki te pō. Kāti, koutou ki te koutou wano, āpiti hono tātai hono, ko koutou wano hoki, te pito mate. Āpiti hono tātai topo nei, ko tātai wāhi nei ki te ao mārama, ki hei ki ora. Nā mai rā e hoki, koutou e kaha nei ki te mātaki mai rā, te tātou nei i tāturanga, te Kohu Ka Rewa, te tūranga kōrero, he tūranga kōrero tēnei, e wakapuakina mai rā kupu rawa ko kōrero, ai wātanga mā te hiningaro nanawe. Nā he wai anō hoki mā tātou ki te ātau witi tātari, nā i ngā karakiatanga kōrero, ngā wakawai, ngā wakataukitanga kōrero, hei painga mā tātou, he whakaaro nui mā tātou. Nori rā kai aku toka tū moana, koutou ahakoa, ākina ngaru tuaranga, ākina te hau tūkeri, tū tonu koutou, ki te mātaki mai rā tō tātou nei hōtaka, ia te wenerei e te rāpa, ana ka tū pēnei mai mātou. Nori rā nau mai hara mai, whakatau mai rā. Anō nei te toko toru, tā tera pēr waiho mā koutou e tapa te ingoa ki runga i mātou, tera pēr, teki nui, teki roa, teki oia, kua tatu mai rā ki tō tātou nei pai, nā rungi i tō tātou nei kōrero, no tērā wiki. Nā ko mātua anō hoki e kawe ake rā tō tātou nei kaupapa. Mehi kawake rā anō hoki ki te korimako o Taranaki, nāna anō hoki tēnei o ngā wakatūranga, i hāpai, ia te wiki. Me o rātou kaha māia ki te wātoro atu rā, ki te nui, ki te rahi, e kaha nei ki te anga mai rā ki tō tātou nei, hōtaki i tēnei pō, nō reira tēnā koutou. Nā, tērā pēr, ka tuku atu rā, te mauri kōrero, kia toka uri, kia Jamie, mana ona kupu, wakataki, ai wakame i atu rā ki tēnā. Tēnā koe, Jamie.
Kei te Poihi, hoi te anō rā e tautaku ana i ngā mihi ki tō tātou manu nei, kia te korimako. Anā kua rere ki uta, kua rere ki tai, kua rere ki runga ki raro, o tino kua rere ki te hinengaro me te watu manua o tēnā o tātou ngā uri o Taranaki maunga e tūtonu nei. Nō reira, me mihi kā tika ki tō tātou taonga nei, ki te manu nei, te korimako. Me te tautoko uki ki ho tātou mate, uia mai rā ho tātou mate, kia mi ia, kia poroporo aki tia. E tātou e te iwi, koutou, ko piri mai, ko tātou mai, ko uki mai, nei ki tō tātou pai kōrero, tēnei kāmii, o reira tēnā rā tātou.
Ka pai kia wai te ia o te kupu o ka puakina rā e kōrua ki tō tātou manu kōrero i te pōnei. Kia te korimako o Taranaki pā o ake nei tōna reo ki ngā tōpito o Taranaki. Tatu atu ki tēnā pito o te motu nei. O ngā motu e rua nei me ki oe no tēnei e mi iana. Tipene, koutou ko te hāpai i tēnei taonga nunui i a tātou. O tēnō, te wai te ia o ngā mii ki o tātou mate ka tika e miki ana. me tō tātou pāpai a kōrero I te pōne. Me te mea nei, ia te wiki, pēnei rā te kōrero ko te tūmanako ka kitea he maramara, ka kitea he aho, ka kitea rānei he māramatanga ia koutou hei whāinga mā koutou, hei tātari e no mā koutou. He rei te mea kai a mātou I runga I tēnei kaupapa I te pōne I ngā kōrero katoa. Engari, ko te tūmanako he maramara e aha rānei, e tāi ai e koutou te tiki ake te wāpā ake. E whakawhānui hei whakahohonu ake I tō koutou ke te mātauranga. Koe no koe nei te kaupapa, e mi ake nei kia tātou. Tēnei, pui, e tukutua kana e tiemi, mihi ana kia kōrua. Kia tātou, te iwi e whakarongo mai ana e mātakitaki mai ana I te pōnei. Kia ora pui.
Tēnā kōrua, te rape tiki nā atu rā tērā o ngā kōrero I hi ake I tērā wiki. Iaha rā te manu, ko taku poi te manu, iaha rā te manu, anā ko taku ringa te manu, iaha rā te manu, ko te korimako tēnei, e rere haere tēnei o ngā hōtaka, ki tēnā, ki tērā, kia tawi homai rā te māramatanga, ki runga I o tātou anō, kia whai māramatanga, e roto I ngā kōrero kaputa mai I tēnei pō. Nō reira, nau mai, hara mai, nā mihi kawake. Welcome back to our hōtaka, Te Kohu Ka Rewa. As you can see, the tokotoru have come back to haunt you, I suppose. But manako nui, we're here to just share some kōrero that we know. Hara tēnei te mutunga mai o ngā kōrero, but I think this is a platform of which we can initiate some discussion amongst our own whānau and to share what we have. And hopefully that it bears fruits for you. And I know a lot of the whānau are watching tonight and doing their studies. I know you're doing mātauranga studies or indigenous studies. So, reference that you got some of the kōrero from here. So, mihi kawake rā kia koutou. And we know that it's a big month, or two things. Last month, the end of last month, te pūtaki o te riri. We know that, I tai atu rā tēnei o ngā Whakapiki Wairua, me o reira kōrero, and last week there was a show on last week, and it was hosted by Rāhui Papa, and he hosted a show where he was able to reach out to some of his people to share some of the kōrero in regards to te pūtaki o te riri. And this month, being November, we know that it's a big month in light that it's the pāhua coming up this coming weekend. And we thought we'd possibly have a little bit of a kōrero around the significance. Significance? Yeah. Significance. I'll call it significance of this month. And there's some associated kōrero in regards to the pāhua. Nō reira, welcome once again to Te Kohu Ka Rewa. Aka, we'll go to our first slide. Mata pai pai. And anei te tehi o ngā kōrero, te rapea waiho ma Jamie waka kori I te hinengaro, pai wāhi ki te āta waka mārama, e tehi rārangi kōrero. So this is our first slide for tonight, and Jamie will just give us a little bit of insight about the knowledge and wisdom within these words.
Ka pai. Nō reira, he tau tēnei, he waiata, e ai ki ngā kōrero nā te pau kō atu tēnei tau, I roto I hāna puka puka, I tino kōrero tia tēnei tau e te miringa, hōhaia. So this is a tau. My understanding is it is reference to Te Pau Ko Atu, Te Kāwe, particularly in some of his writings, and it was a kōrero that was often recounted by Te Miringa, and hei wairai te ia o ngā kōrero he paitunu, and kia ruku atu ki henei kātu kōrero o ngā mātua. So we thought that given as we enter this period of commemoration of the pāhua, that we sort of look into some of the kōrero around te pari akatanga o ngā mātua, kia māramara tātou ki te pari akatanga o tēnei waka tupuruma. And so, nau mai e te motu kia ki te koe te puapua, kia ki te koe te werewere, kia ki te koe ato u kākahi rāu ko te uti orongo mai te tangata nānai, ere mai te mamai mo te motu, te tangata nānei, wakaura te karaka e tū nei, ko te rangi Māori, ko te rongo mau ki te ao. And this is the sort of first stanza of this particular tau. Hemi will be able, I mean, I think the balance of it talks about tēnei tātou e te iwi, kōti te tī taritari, tau ke wehe ke. So the second verse sort of talks about the fact that we had been spread, cast aside, and dispersed. But this is a really interesting kōrero because of the language, right? And I think, again, hei ti te kupu engari, kei roto I te tau nei, te hohunutanga ngā mahi a tohu kākahi rāua ko te witi o rongo mai. So it calls upon, no mai te mutu kia ki te koe, te puapua kia ki te koe, te were were. And so, this, a lot of this, he kupu whakahau tēnei. So it's calling out at a time, at a period where, our people were pressured for people to come. So this is calling people to come to Parihaka. Kia ki te koe te puapua. Beautiful word, te puapua. It has multiple meanings. So ko te puapua o te wahine. So, that part of the woman's anatomy. We talked about tiki last week being the phallus. Well, ko te puapua, sort of speaking about sort of life, right? So it's the female parts, and so it's signifying life. Kia ki te koe te were were. And, there are interpretations of this particular kōrero that, were were are the pubic hair. So if you think about this, the picture it's painting here, and as we've discussed, over the weeks, that in our old people, it wasn't sort of, you could talk about sexual parts and it wasn't an issue. So it's saying, come, kia ki te koe te puapua, kia ki te koe te were were. So you can see in detail all of these beautiful, wonderful elements of life that reside here in Parihaka. So it's talking about, the beauty and the bounty and the prosperity of Parihaka. And then, puapua, so play on words, blossoming and all of those sorts of things. Kia ki te koe ia tohu kākahi rāua ko te uti o rongo mai. So that, that you may see tohu and te whiti. And so, during this period of time, there was a lot of people talking about what Parihaka was or wasn't. And so they're saying, hara mai kia ki te koe. And te tangata nānei here mai te mamai mo te motu nei. So, they're saying, the man, the person who has bound himself to the afflictions and the pain of this country, of this land. And so, ka ki te koe e nei, I tēnei āhuatanga I roto I ngā waiata. So often, sort of in the biblical references in the Bible, you see, I don't want to say martyr, but, tohu and te whiti become the examples of, and they sort of bearing the pain on behalf of the people. Te tangata nānei, wakaura te karaka e tū nei. And, we've talked about this statement, and here it is again, whānau, in that ngeri ka tohe au. So, they're the men that, sort of, that flag, they become the sort of sentinel, that po, that pillar, that provides inspiration and stability for the people. And, ko te rangi Māori, ko te rangi rongo mau ki te ao. And so, we understand and we know the philosophy and the approach of ngā manuerua, non-violent action. And Hemi me kōrero pēnā ne, because, te miringa again, also, it was non-violent action. This, what's the other, passive resistance and those sorts of things. But, I actually quite like the framing of non-violent action. Bueno, kei a koe pia Hemi, hei āpiti atu.
Yeah, I think it's one of my favourite ones, actually. There's a lot of favourite ones we've got, but it's worded so beautifully with imagery and symbolism around, a place that's welcoming people that are bearing such and again, think about the context of the time. It was bloodshed and war in the early to mid 1860s. So Parihaka was providing a place of refuge for a lot of people bearing a lot of, not baggage, but a lot of dark and heavy kind of burdens as a consequence of war. Yeah. So the imagery in this tau becomes really, really quite significant. And of course, there's a second piece to it that talks about other things as well. But this piece for me talks about the origin of Parihaka being a place where they were the origin, I suppose, of place where they were binding people's afflictions to this kāinga called Parihaka, and this symbol of the sentinel. Te karaka, we spoke about that, Jamie said in Katoheo. At that time, their karaka, or their rock, or their sentinel, or their commitment or conviction was associated with being quite let's say, war or a violent action. But this particular piece talks about the way in which he became the sentinel, and the point, the rock that established and gave emergence to Rangi Māori me te rongomau, which, and as Jamie said, to Miringa was always talk to his family and those around us about, Parihaka was sure passive resistance, but in his view it was non-violent action. We're going to talk a little bit more tonight about the action, ko taku ringa te manu, the action that the old people kind of gave effect to or materialised during their time. Yeah, I think that's a beautiful statement. Te tangata nānei kaura te karaka e tūnei, ko te rangi Māori e ko te rongomau ki te ao. From Tohu and Te Whiti, and of course around Tohu and Te Whiti were a whole lot of other prominent and inspirational leaders that gave rise to this symbol and point of conviction, or this rock and philosophy, and some of us say liberation movement, about non-violent action, peaceful ways to demonstrate action that didn't lead to bloodshed. So it's a tau. I've heard it used quite a bit from the Paipai, opening up a kōrero. I think it's a beautiful piece. And of course, there are plays on words and plays on meanings that other people might be familiar with. E te kāna.
Probably just to add to that, I think I remember Te Minigan using active resistance. I think that was one of his lines. Active resistance was one of his lines. Actually, the same passive resistance didn't give it sort of its the weight that it needed to give action to it. But I like the idea of using these. Yes, you can use it in this particular line, but you can use it if somebody is champion a particular kaupapa. You can use parts of this. This kōrero, hei hāpai, hei wakamana, hei wakarangatira ake i a rātou. Te tangata nāna wakaura te karaka e tūnei, whether it be fighting for the land, or whether it be fighting for the language, or ko te huirangi anō hoki tērā nāna i wakaura te karaka e tūnei, ko te reo Māori. So there are various ways we can use some of these kōrero. I like the imagery of the puapua in the pūngā were or were. And it's when we're talking about these particular say physical attributes, those are really talking about life. So the bearers of life. So they bear the pain when they give birth, and just like Te Whiti and Tohu, they are bearing the pain through the context of the time. So that's how I kind of sort of can align these kōrero with balance. So it's a beautiful kōrero.
I've also seen the use of the word ki te koe te puapua, ki te koe te weri, and in two different places. So e te kāna ngā me rua ki tā te kaituhi, ki tā te tangata. But mā koutou e kimi hā te tika mō tēnei mea te weri. ko te pua, ko te wiri, haere ngātahi ana I te wākotahi, ne?
Yeah.
Ko te mea he pai, ko te mea ka hare te tino pai.
Yeah, and I think, he tauira no tēnei o te whakatakotoranga o ngā kupu o ngā mātua. So, those that are really interested in Waikōrero, looking at the te whakatakotoranga o ngā kupu, so the frameworks and the language patterns, nau mai te mutu kia ki te koe I te āhurutanga o te ware o mutunga e tū nei. Kia ki te koe ia tarangi hiro ia tā māwi pōmare. Te tangata nā whakatauira mai ko te putunga ki te ao o te mātauranga. You can start sort of mixing it up. And so that's the beautiful thing, right? The structures are very much sort of who we are. And so, encourage people to adopt these sort of language patterns.
And I suppose there's just the simplicity of it. So, just having a look at the simplicity of te tangata, nāna, I here mai, te mamai, mo te motu. Māma noi ho tērā wakatakatouranga kōrero. So, all our language purists out there.
Hey, Te Poihi, I was just looking now, actually, I won't name the old queers when I was growing up, when we used to talk about tohu and te whiti. They always used to say, ko te witi o rongo mai rāua ko tohu kākai. And then rather than tohu kākai rāua ko te witi o rongo mai, it's quite, like just looking at this and Aunt Marge and a few others, their sort of voices came back to me.
Yeah.
Ka hare ki te tonga he ririki.
Tērā no te tonga, no te tonga, tēnei tirohanga.
Ko te pore.
Te pore.
Pai. Wai anō, tērā pēr ka nui tērā, mihi ana. And I suppose we're going to have a look at a common I te rā o mai. We know that there's it's pretty wordy here, but it's quite appropriate, I suppose, even though it's not my hair. But we're going to have a look at the essence of the kupu, noima, I te rā o noima, tēnā koe Hemi.
Papers is rock on this one. No, I have a dive in. It seems to be, we get contacted quite a bit to support people in their respective kind of areas of study, and this waiata comes up quite often, yeah. So we thought, well, in the spirit of pariaka, we thought, well, let's kind of have a little bit of a look at one of our more well-known waiata that's kind of been becoming more and more common, yeah. I'm not saying that common in a bad way, but more and more people have become interested in the waiata, and more people are learning it. Definitely see and hear that. So, te rā o maihe, I te rā o maihe, we kind of use te rā o maihe as a title. There have been questions around who the composer is, and I've heard, you guys probably may have heard too, that Tonga Apiko has become associated with this waiata, and actually he's the only one I've heard of. We've got in my own kind of whānau manuscript books, it's written, but it says he waiata nā te here. So I couldn't hand on heart say that I know who the composer is, apart from the fact that I've heard Tonga Apiko being associated with it. Engari, mā koutou e kimi, mā koutou e rapu, I te ahunga mai o tēnei waiata. Engari, kua kite au I roto I etehi puka, ko te e mea ke nei, he waiata nā te here. He waiata mo te here, he waiata nā te here. So it's definitely got its associations with the ploughmen who were taken prisoner in 1879. Well, this is the beginning of the ploughing campaigns, started in 1879, yeah? Fellas got anything to add to that? Yeah, so I te rā o maihe is a direct reference to the time, and maihe has become a really, really historic marker in our history. Yeah, so it definitely references the time of the 18th of March 1860, and it also references when the first shots ka katoro te ahi ki runga ki te whenua. I've heard that statement and seen that statement quite often throughout various references. But I te rao mahi ka iri kei te torona, so that the day in March where we are raised up onto the throne. And so the day of March directly references the time of Waitara when in 18th of March 1860, and it's at that time that we became raised up on the throne, I suppose, for want of a better translation. Yeah. So what you'll find in this Waitara is it kind of becomes a little bit of a journey from which the prisoners or the ploughmen of the time began this journey. So there's a little bit of a chronological or a linear order to it, which you'll see. And the words in here, I think, are really, really beautiful. Guys, got anything to add? I'll just keep asking if you've got anything to add, eh?
And I'll just that, kairi kei te torona is really a phrase about it to highlight the significance of a particular kaupapa, well, in this case, for a particular time. So kairi kei te torona is just really a phrase to highlight that, what's been preceded. In this case, te rao mahi, it's just been highlighted as a very significant time. So once again, using these readinga kōrero in your own kōrero, whatever significant to you, you can apply, kairi kei te torona tēnei kaupapa.
Yeah. Tika, me ko puta mai tētahi pātai anō oki mō te waiata te kōti. So koutou e mōhiu ana ki tērā waiata te kōti ka tūhau ka korikori. Āhua ori te whakatakotoranga o ngā waiata e rua nei. And as we've discussed in previous weeks, tēnei mea te whakatuapekatanga o ngā waiata. So you see, and particularly this waiata, it's very similar to, it's very similar, just different places and names, basically.
Yeah, so for me, the first line, te rao mahi, is, if you dig deep into the significance of the day in March or the significance of March for us in Taranaki, it's actually become quite significant for Waikato as well, yeah. References that point in time in 1860 where basically the struggle and war that had major impacts on Taranaki right to this day began. Kairi kei te torona was, as Te Poihi references, that this became a very, very prominent time, and that March was heralded as a time and referenced as a particular time in our history that Te Iti would constantly go back to as a point in time that was never ever addressed. And even petitions that the old people put through the government would constantly say "Kare noa waitara kia whakawākia," which referenced that time in 18th of March. He pine he nera ka whakawākia, kare noa waitara kia whakawākia. If you stole a pin or a pen, you were put to trial. But what about Waitara? It's never really been investigated. So, when we talk about March, there's this deep-seated history associated with that time. And of course, Maui Pomare was seen as a kind of figure that sought to have that addressed. That's another big rabbit hole we could go down, but probably not tonight because we're only on the first line. But I do want to make reference to kairi kei te torona because Te Iti, during the time of the ploughing campaigns, has this beautiful kōrero. It goes something like, ka wakataka e ahau te hunga kaha I runga I ngā torona ka mainga te hunga nono hi te runga. Ka mākona tia te hunga matekai ki ngā mea pai. Te hunga whai taonga ia, ka whakahoki a rawa koretia. Ka torona te whenua, ka torona te tangata. Haere noatia te whenua, nōku te whenua ko te parau tēnei. Ka parau a Taranaki, Ngāti Ruanui e te ati awa ka mau katoa ki te herehere. So when we talk about I te rā ka iri kei te torona, I make direct reference back to that time when Te Iti was saying ka whakataka e ahau te hunga kaha I runga I ngā torona. I will dethrone the strong meaning referencing those that were part of the system.
Empowering the wealthy.
I will I will dethrone and disempower
The authorities.
the powerful authorities through this action of ploughing.
Yeah.
And I will raise the meek, or the meek upon the throne.
Yeah.
I will give sustenance to the starving, and will render the wealthy poor through this action of ploughing. So when I see Kauri Kei Te Toro, and I see this direct reference back to that kind of speech where he's saying, I will raise you upon high, and the work that we're doing is for a higher order. And of course, ka mautaku ringa ki te parau e hau nei te whenua. So that as a consequence of Kauri Kei Te Toro, na ka mautaku ringa ki te parau, where those that were ploughing took to the plough. Taku ringa ka mau ki te parau. Ka toro taku ringa ki te atua, e tū nei ka whakatohe. You got an explanation for that, Jamie?
Well, I think the key thing here, right, he nui ngā waiata mō ngā kupu whakahau a te witi. Muri ahi it says, ringi atu, pine atu, tura kina atu ngā tataurino. So there's all of these sort of kupu whakahau and waiata and wakataukitanga kōrero. Ka toro taku ringa ki te atua e tū nei, ka whakatohe. So, we always sort of call upon just think of it, the whānau are going out to plough the land on the instruction of te witi and tohu, te kimi nei tēnei mea te ora. And, there are times when we're feeling a bit not at ease, ka karangatu ki tētahi anō.
Apprehensive.
When you're a bit apprehensive, you look for a higher guidance.
My hand is extended to God. Or to the atua, so that I may stand resolute.
Resolute.
Yeah.
Ka toro taku ringa ki te atua, e tū nei
ka whakatohe.
I suppose ka mautaku ringa ki te parau, that is he mai toe. Te kawanatanga.
Right.
And so they, as you know, they were called to action there to get out to it's almost a protest. Well, it was a protest of sorts. But also, kia wakapuna anō hoki ki ngā kupu o te atua. Kia tūpakari ki tēnei kaupapa.
And of course, as a consequence of our people putting their shoulder and their hand to the plough, ka puta te haia te kawana e tango nei te whenua. And some might say, well, that we puta ke te haia te kawana I mue te maunga o te parau. But I think they're both ka haere ngātahi ana I te wākotahi. What we know is the context is that there was definitely some, how would you say that, some bad and ill feelings on the side of the government and the governor at the time, which led to and happened as a consequence of those ill feelings. And it's probably a lot of harsh words that we could say in association with that. But so the next line is e koreo e taia he uri no hohepa. So that I will not be overcome. E koreo e taia is a word that we use for I will not be overcome. I am a descendant of Joseph. No ngā tūpuna. So we ask ourselves, he uri no hohepa, how te tikanga o tērā? And what we know, and there are many people much more knowledgeable than us on this pai tonight about the Bible and the Old Testament and the characters and figures found within the Old Testament. But in short, what we know is hohepa I mauheretia a hohepa. I hokona ki roto I te I mauherehere. I hereheretia a hohepa I ona tuakana ne. And so Joseph was taken and sold into slavery, I believe. And so the old people were likening their plight or their situation at the time and making connection and drawing the whakapapa back to hohepa for the way in which he was taken into slavery. And of course, hohepa was brought back to life or re-emerged during his life as someone that is someone that could read dreams. E momo poropiti nei, ne?
Yeah, matakite.
And yeah, and so he prophesied for the Pharaoh the 7 years of growth and 7 years of blight.
Yeah.
So he became a very, very prominent figure after he was taken into slavery after a period of time. So if we put that into the context of the old people that were taken in to prison or sent to prison without trial, mauheretia ngā tangata parau nei, e tia nei, o tōna rite ko te huarahi i a hōhepa. Hoki ora mai a hōhepa ki roto ki tāna kāinga.
Yeah, so koe te tauira, ne? Aha koe mau here a hōhepa, ka puta anō aia ki te ora. You know, i te here-tanga. The beautiful thing for me about this reading is actually this is a Taranaki, you know, e kore au e taia. He uri au o mutunga, he uri au o Taranaki, no ngā tupuna. You know, that for me, I love that as a statement. You know, when you can stand, you know, e kore tātou e taia, ko te uri no tātou o Taranaki maunga e tūnei. Beautiful language, eh?
It is.
And,
simple.
And of course, i ua mai au ki runga ki te tikanga hei mura ai. I'm cast upon a path of righteousness. Yeah? I ua mai au ki runga i te tikanga koe rā tapu. Tō tātou whakapākehātanga i te rārenga kōrero.
Te pai huki, Hemi.
To stoke the fire. Hei mura ai.
Yeah.
I ua mai au ki runga ki te tikanga hei mura ai.
Yeah, we were cast upon this experience, you know. Yeah, we were. Ka paira.
Hei mura ai. As fuel for the fire, as or to incite some action.
Oh, yeah.
Ka pai piho pa Hemi. Hare tonu.
Puna. Hare mai koe puna. Utaina mai au ki runga i a hine mō, so here we have obviously a direct
No, ka tere moana nui. Ka tere moana nui au ngā waka iu.
Oh, jumped on that one, jumped past that one. Whiu mai au ki runga ki te tikanga hei mura i ka tere moana nui au, ngā waka iu kei pā pūrona. And I see that as a direct reference to to Babylon.
Babylon.
So what's the significance of Babylon, boys?
Puna.
I think you're asking the wrong people there, Mr. Sundgren.
Yeah, I think we are. No, I think, look, I've got a very limited understanding of certain things within the Bible, but in short, I think Babylon is a kind of symbol of rebellion.
Rebellion, yeah.
Babylon became the city or a big place, and it symbolized sin and rebellion. So this particular sentence talks about the way in which people were cast upon, you know, this vessel to Babylon,
Yeah,
which
to
symbolized
a place of
yeah.
Burial, you know.
Yeah. And of course they were loaded onto utaina mai au ki runga i a hine moa hau we terene. So you can kind of see the linear or the kind of the journey that those that were caught up in this terrible kind of thing, the journey that they were taking and the thinking, this depth of thinking, and how they were likening that to other plights and other journeys that inspired their life and their whakapapa, I suppose. So utaina mai au ki runga i a hine moa au we tere nei. So they were loaded upon hine moa, hine moa that should be. Utaina mai au ki runga i a hine moa, which we all know was the name of the government steamer that took the prisoners down to Dunedin, ki o tākau, hau we tere nei, kind of which sailed down to Dunedin. Ka tahuri whakamuri he wai kai aku kamo e riringi nei. So as I turn back, my eyes become a kind of constant stream of tears. So this is you can imagine putting yourself in that situation where you're taken into prison, loaded upon the government steamer, and then shipped off to prison without trial. And the kind of tears and the sadness that one would be feeling during that time. So that's a really heartfelt kind of statement there.
And of course, you know, I te rawa you know, he nui ngā tuhinga o te pauritanga o tama wahine o ngā wahine noho mai ki te kāinga. So a lot of our kupu kōrero, sort of there are accounts of, you know, the anguish and the pain, and there's actually detailed newspaper articles too.
Yeah,
about the anguish of those that were left our wahine, our kuia.
Yeah. Ruth has just commented by saying that Babylon he wahi mo te here here.
Wahi mo te here here.
Sorry.
I was just thinking that this all builds into the trauma of the time. So, you know, emotional trauma that was bestowed upon us as a people. And so you can kind of connect with that, with those feelings that have been sort of transpired over that time.
Yeah. So of course, the next line says, "Wanganui raukawa, ngā ngaru whakapuke kai o tākau." So as they pass through Wanganui, and of course they sail through Raukawa Moana, and those of us that have sailed through Raukawa Moana will know he ngaru puke puke kai te rā wai, and then they arrived at Otago. So it traces the journey from Wanganui. They traces the journey from when they're loaded onto the government steamer here in New Plymouth. After being held or detained here in New Plymouth, and then they're loaded onto the ship, and they travel through Wanganui, the Raukawa Straits, and they arrive in Otago. E noho e te iwi tu ake ki runga rā me te hari anō. So they arrive in Otago, where the people are upstanding. And it's with, some, I don't like to say gladness, but it's with there's some sort of
relief, I think, bro.
Relief, yeah, definitely.
That they arrived there.
Yeah. And ahua reka ana te rere mai o te ao nā rungai kauru. Sorry, Jamie.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so it's with some, what do we say? With some relief and a little bit of happiness that there's familiar faces that are greeting them.
And the other thing too, right? The other thing, right, is that ngā kupu kōrero a te witi. He said, go, because they were doing, as you said, it was that righteous act because he kaupapa nui tēnei, and he nui ngā kōrero me ngā kupu whakahau o te iwi. And when you see some of the, when people were getting picked up, we just talk about Te Rangi Puahuahu's, when he's in court, him, they were, the old people said, we are not Pōuri, we are not sad, for we've done nothing wrong. And, they had become,
they become, is martyr the right word? And there's some beautiful kōrero about Te Witi saying, haere koutou, tomo kia ngā ware kiengi, ngā ware raiona. Hua kina ngā tataurino, things like that. Haere koutou, kia waka kinongia koutou mo tōku ingoa.
Yeah.
So they
me te mōhio anō ka tau te whakamā ki runga I te kāwanatanga mohana mahi kino ki te iwi.
Yeah, kia waka kinongia koutou mo tōku ingoa, so you become martyrs in my name.
Yeah.
It's a path. Yeah, kare o mātou he. Kāri rere te toto. Things like that. So, e noho ahuare kāna, o pai tērā, ahuare kāna te rere mai o te ao nārunga I kairuru, where, you know, the people arrive with a feeling of, relief. And that they turn to Zion. I ahu mai hiona I te pau tūturu. So they turn to the scriptures and the symbols and the is that the right word? The reference points of hiona.
Yeah, well, he tohu anō, ne? So if you think about the whole narrative around hiona, Zion, again, a play on words because of the reference in the Bible and what that symbolizes, and of course, hiona I pariaka.
Yeah. And hiona became the pillar of, I say, righteousness and truth for many of them. Yeah. Kūpapa e te iwi ka raro I ki te maru o te ariki, where we become, kūpapa, I think, needs to be taken in context of the Bible, where the people became, I think the literal translation is kind of subservient, but it was subservient to a higher cause. When you commit and you have such a strong conviction to your belief and your faith. So that
maybe loyal, their loyalties, they were loyal to the cause.
That's my understanding of that sentence there, where hiona became the pillar of truth and for them to draw inspiration from, and that they become they can, I say subservient, but not in a bad way, subservient to such a higher order, which was ki raro I te maru o te ariki.
So, you know, because the, kupapa iho means to actually lie down flat, right? So it's sort of pay homage to.
That's the one.
So it's not kupapa in the more recent where, you know, kupapa ki te kāwanatanga, but that in itself, I mean, that you become not subservient, but you are committed or loyal to a particular path or kaupapa.
That's the one.
So it calls upon, given hiona being the, is it the city of David? You know, ko te maunga, te maunga o te atua. And so, again, it becomes a, you know, you can recontextualize this today. You know, we look upon Taranaki as being our hiona. Yahu mai Taranaki, te pau tūturu e maharatia nei.
So I really like that one because, you know, as you said before, when you're looking and you're a little bit apprehensive about the path that you're taking, ka toro taku ringa ki te atua hei whakawhirina ki tanga māku. Similar case here, kei te kūpapa te iwi ki raro I te maru o te ariki. Hei kawe mō tātou ki runga te oranga o tonutanga. As a way in which to kind of help us emerge and convey us to eternal life. Mo te oranga tonutanga.
Paito reo pākua e o.
Te kātira ngā kupu I maka I te wā I muara. Enough, there were enough words that were cast in the past. Tēnā ko tēnei, wakarongo ki te wā I te pira I te whenua. And so it's time for us to observe these new messages, you know, that fly and skip across the land. Hei whakahari ake, mō te mahi o te uti, mana nei te mutunga. For us to uphold. So we're taking time now to observe the new messages and the new path that we're taking to uphold the work of Te Uti. Who will ultimately have the final word, mana nei te mutunga.
So I think, you know, when we think about, you know, just how amazing our tupuna were, right? The power of symbolism, you know, and we've talked about some of our more traditional sort of Māori symbols. And then here you see the, you know, adopting those symbols, you know, Papurona, ka pai tai. So, you got Papurona on one side and Hiona on the other. And so, that key theme and message, if you listen to Koro Mohi Ware Pauri and all of the old people, hea te tino kaupapa, ko te puta I te mate ki te ora. So it's how we might emerge through the troubles, the turbulence, those things that have afflicted us. And essentially you see those things again, right? Yeah. Hohepa is an example for us to follow. He overcame those things. Papurona, when you get in that state, and ka aro atu ki te maunga nei kia hiona, because that's an example of a place that we will prosper and it's prosperous. And then, not forgetting those kātira, ngā kupu I maka I te wai muara. Whakarongo ki te, I think that hymn is lovely, we probably need to take hold of that today, We often hold, we hold some he te heo ngā kupu a he tahi atu, whakareria, makātu.
Makātu, makaya. So that'll be self-slavery, I think, is to hold on to it, self-slavery. But I think the idea behind those two reading especially is to, move ahead, move forward.
I think when you're in, well, you put yourself in their shoes when they're in prison, there needs to be something for us to grasp hold of and as a point for us, as a conviction and commitment to a higher order or a righteous path, and those are the kinds of things that we, rightly or wrongly today, some of us kind of a little bit wavering on, So, I look at this and think, man, it's such a huge inspiration where they were taken without trial. They were dragged off the field, off the ploughing field, detained in New Plymouth, without trial, loaded up onto a ship, sent to prison for 18 months, hard labour, and you need something. So I think it's such a sad kind of, a really, really, I say sad for a terrible thing, but the words in here are just so inspirational.
Yeah, and I think, ko te mea nui anō hoki, a lot of our whānau today, te whiti tohu, our tupuna, we're not afraid to, they understood the Bible. And Christianity and the symbolism in the Bible assisted them, right? It wasn't either or. And you see that through a lot of kōrero we've had, ka haere ngātahi, because they were very aware and they had good foundations of our own understanding and worldview. And they saw, the Bible and the kōrero there as, hei āpititanga ki ngā kōrero, harātau ake kōrero.
I like the idea of how they were quite clever in using the paipera tapu mui ana kōrero, hāngai ki tō rātou tāmitanga. So just taking some of those scriptures, alignment, using, obviously we can see, so like probably what you said before, Jamie, so, the first slide that we had, there were references to the pūpua and there were reference to were, so there's none of that stuff in here, those types of references, very much with the Bible references, torona, hohepa, hiona, papurona, and so it's kind of just stayed in a lane. That's what I thought with this particular waiata, and everybody could relate, because there must have been at that time some real learnings and teachings of the Bible. They were entrenched in that kōrero, so this would have been very persuasive in their thinking. And so in order for tohu kākahi and te witi o rongo mai to get their message across, using those references probably resonated a lot with our people at that time.
Yeah, me te mea nei, I pariaka, he nui ngā pānuitanga kōrero ne. He nui, they were constantly, there was a lot of dialogue, there was a lot of discussion, there was a lot of that inspirational kōrero. And, you know, and ka kite koe ina hea te kaia te rangatira, hera mea ko te hunga ka whaka kake I a rātua anō, but it actually, te kaia te rangatira, talks about the importance
Discourse
of
and
discourse, right?
discourse and debate, because what emerged from that was a very, very clear either course of action or a clear mahere. Yeah.
Or some key messages.
Well, you constantly I would always hear about only the best went to Pareka. Now I'm not saying the best people and best of everything, but what that told me was there was a lot of discourse and deep debate. And Jamie, they recorded a lot of that history too. Yeah, we go, you know, in the 1870s, he tau no te akoranga ka tū ngā kōrero hei akoranga mā te iwi I ngā kaupapa tini e puta mai ana I te aroaro o te kawana. So they were debating, having discourse and working out ways to respond in different ways. That many of the leaders during that time kind of went to Pareaka to have that discourse so that they could find a way through. And they were drawing off all these inspirational systems like the Bible and as we've said in the past, Jamie, the poi, the traditional philosophies and systems in a way that helped them respond to such kind of troubling times.
Mm-hmm. Te poi, I wonder whether if we skip through a couple of slides and at least do the first one on Te Pāua.
Yeah, because we've only got a couple of minutes.
I was just looking at the time, and then it'd be useful just to provide some of that historical context around Te Pāua.
Yeah. Next one. So we spoke just before about how history was being recorded, and generally they were recording it in time periods. So at this period, the title of this kind of kōrero was recorded in a way that kind of said, I te tau ko tahi mano waru tekau mātahi ka kōrero mo te pāhua. And then they would record it in speech form. And so this is kind of how it plays out, where you have recollections of the old people and how they recorded history in this way. So this is a way in which a kōrero mo te pāhua was recorded. E runga, ka kōrero a te uti, e runga e raro whai mai, e uta e tai nuku mai, he kahato koutou neke mai. So you can imagine the speeches that were taking place during this time, and this is what was being said. He pakanga ki te paku te pua te kawana me piko te kawana kia tohu. Jamie, I'll let you choose that.
Okay, so I mean, this is probably one of my other favourite. If you're standing up, you don't quite know who's in the manuhiri crowd. Anei koutou e mahi wai kōrero ana, you say e runga e raro wai mai e uta e tai nuku mai, ki taku pauware a te aroha e tūnei. Nuku mai, neke mai, e raro. A really beautiful way of just being able to welcome people from the four winds or from wherever they may come. So he karanga tēnei ki te iwi. North, south, inland, from the coast, nuku mai, he kahato koutou neke mai, he pakanga. So, kei reira rā ngā kōrero a te uti, ko te pakanga nei harai, te pakanga I mōhio tia nei e ngā mātua, engari he pakanga tonu. So this is, we talked earlier about non-violent action or what do you not passive, active resistance, because he pakanga tonu. And so, ki te paku te pua te kāwana me piko te kāwana ki to'u. So we all know the narrative about the cannon being placed upon Te Pūrepo.
And in Pungarehu.
Oh, at Pungarehus, yeah. And it's saying, so, if the government's cannon goes off,
Tohu
wins.
Yeah.
Because he's got them, because they've reacted in a way and responded in a way. They've used their might. Ki te kore paku te pua te kāwana.
Me piko te kawana kia tohu.
They should still now down to tohu.
He wins again.
So it's a win-win for us. If the kawana, if he fires his cannon, He's firing his cannon upon people who are have a peaceful kaupapa and philosophy. Ki te kore paku, kua toa te witi. Tohu, sorry. So ka rongo te kāwana ka puta te kupu I tēnei rangi, ka kiria katoatia te tāne te wahine me ngā tamariki, tae atu ki tō roto I te kōpū, ka kiria katoatia ka tua te witi. Ahakoa te kau ngā pūnu nui ki roto I ngā parepare o pungareu, ka uenuku, ahakoa he mano he uenuku, ka utu e te kāwana ko te pāua. Maybe you just summarise that sort of hymn, because we probably should go to the next slide too.
Yeah, me piko basically, what this does is set out the context for how in which the pāhua happened. Yeah. So what the context is the government organised themselves and occupied Pungarehu as the base for their campaign to march on Te Poihi. And so this really talks about the dialogue between Tohu and Te Witi and the kawana at the time. Basically, Tohu's kind of baiting them, saying, if the cannon goes off, you should bow to us. But I think I've also heard Tohu said, I'll bow to you as well. But if the gun doesn't go off, you'll need to bow to Tohu and Te Poihi. But I think the governor at the time, the context is that the governor at the time got intensely frustrated and he said, ka kiria katoatia, I'll kill you all. Te tāne te wahine me ngā tamariki tae atu ki tō roto I te kōpū. Men, woman, child, and those that are yet to be born. Ka kiria katoatia.
Yeah, and that transliteration, he killed.
Yeah, kiria is to kill. And Katuat and Te Whiti responded by saying, I don't care if you have 10 guns within the blockade of Pungarehu, they will not go off. Ka wenuku. Ahakoa mano, and if you have 1,000,
Kataka.
Kataka. And so the government's response to that was the pāhua, basically a campaign to pass it.
So this is the precursor, right? So, building up to this was the government were getting intensely frustrated. They thought that Te Whiti and Tohu had so much authority and power over our community. And you had kōrero anō tēnā, but this is that lead up to, and this is the mastery of Tohu and Te Whiti, right?
Yeah, playing their So the next slide. And so basically the governor's response was ko te pāhua tēnei te ono o ngā rao noima, ka whakaeke nea Poihi and Poihi is occupied. And at which time Te Witi said, takoto e te iwi I raro I ngā kōrero o ngā whakatupuranga. Tēnā koe te iwi, me pono ana I tēnei rā, kuia tēnei kia tū a ihoa, I mua I tēnei hui ngai tēnei rangi. He rā pauri. So basically Tohu's, Te Witi and Tohu of course was saying, this is the time for us to draw inspiration from the generations of the past. If we are true to ourselves today, this day, ihua will be amongst us. Ka tua ihua I mua I tēnei hui ngai tēnei rangi. He rā pauri, he rā tukupu pauri kere. These are the days of darkness, yeah? He rā pauri, he pauri, tukupu pauri kere. These are the days of darkness. Kia tū a ihua I mua I tēnei hui hunga, where ihua will stand amongst us, or be amongst us, yeah?
I love that sort of takoto I te iwi raro I ngā kōrero a ngā wakatupuranga. This is what we've been talking about, right? So having sort of faith and confidence of the deeds and the acts and the experiences of our tupuna, how they have emerged.
Yes.
And then that whole thing, you've got to have faith, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Me pono ana tēnei, you've got to me pono tātou.
Yeah. If we are faithful.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I love that. We had our pōri, and I don't know if this is where Hazel, Days of Darkness?
Yeah.
May have drawn inspiration, but had our pōri, had our tukupu pōri kere. These are the days of darkness.
Darkness, yeah.
Kia tū a ihua I mua I tēnei. So he's calling on ihua to be, as a point of conviction or to be amongst us and as strength, to draw strength. Kia tau te rangi Māori. So that's saying kia tau te rangi Māori. Kia manua nui. Be peaceful. Be peaceful, but be resolute. Te wāia noa, I think we may have discussed this in the past wānanga, guys, but te wāia noa, at the time of Noah, their vessel of salvation, or their symbol of salvation or life, was the ark. He āka te oranga. And ka pāhure tērā o ka tupuranga. I love this term about pāhure as people who manage to be to live or to pass through. Ka pāhure tērā o ka tupuranga. So that generation survived, yeah. I te wāia Rota, and my understanding is that character is Lot.
Yeah.
And that he his response to survive was to flee, and I think he
ran away.
Yeah, he rather than to stand and fight, I think they fled. Was it Sodom? They fled the city that they were living in, and those that generation survived. So they're drawing on these symbols of the past in the Old Testament and characters of the Old Testament to provide inspiration to the people at the time. But this is the one that I love. I tēnei rangi nei, me here ngā ringa, me here ngā wai, ka utaina ki runga ki tō waka I te rangi Māori me te manawa nui. So on this day, we need to be bound together. Our hands and our feet are bound together, and we'll be set, and we will get on to our waka, which was peaceful and resolute. And of course, the response is, I tēnei rangi nei, ka ope hea notia te kōpai heki I raro I te kātua. Our people were bound together like eggs, like a nest of eggs, and sat upon by the parent. So in that context, it's drawing reference to the way in which the governor had basically drawn everyone. And another term is ka ope hea taiwatia, so they were drawn together like potatoes. Another concept is ope hea notia te kōpai heki I raro I te kātua. They're drawn together, brought together, and the whole pa was occupied, of course, and we all, not all of us, but most of us will know the history of the occupation of Pariaka for a long period of time. And during that time, kaore he kai pipipi, kaore he kai kokoko. So the reference being drawn, or the symbol being drawn here, drawn to here, is that, you know, there was no food to forage. The way in which the chicken forages its food when it walks across, ko te pipipi and ka pēnei te hei pipipi. Kai
timo, eh?
Ko te kōkoko koera te mahi a te parera ne, he kōkoko I te kai. So they're drawing reference to the way in which the hei walks across the land and picks its kai, and of course the parera which walks across the land and draws its kai.
Yeah.
So there was no kai, very little kai at the time for them to kind of walk about freely during their daily life. So ka ope hea notia te kōpai heki I raro I te kātua, kāre he kai pipipi, kāre he kai kōkoko.
I suppose ope hea notia, you can relate it to, say, the words like mustered or corralled to come together.
Pai
tēnā.
Ka pai kua hipa noa te wā.
Ko te mea pai ki au, koe nei te tauira o ngā tuhinga o ngā mātua. So as Hemi sort of indicated, again, our tupuna, they were able to capture these moments in these proclamations. And you see there's a lot of consistency with this kōrero through multiple manuscript material. And, they became kupu kōrero. And when you think about it, if you want to be able to remember and acknowledge and recount these moments, there's nothing better than he nei kātu kōrero, because, mo te pāhua, tēnei te rao te pāhua, ka takotoe te iwi I raro I ngā kōrero ngā waka tupuranga. And so you can start to acknowledge and recount the kōrero through these pānuitanga kōrero, and they're beautiful.
Yeah,
beautiful. So
And there's another couple of verses to this where it talks about how does a saw cut down a tree?
That's right.
Ma ka pēwea te tuki e a hau ai te rākau. Kei te hua ke te tuki nānei motu ai te rākau. Ka pēwea te ringa te mea nānei ha hau ai. So how does the tuki cut down the tree without the hand controlling the tuki? So they were asking these things. How does this the dog doesn't flee towards the pig without its master telling it to, so it's kind of, so they're making these beautiful statements about, how does the axe cut down a tree without the hand that controls the axe?
Holds it, yeah.
Or how does the saw down the tree without the hand that draws the saw?
Yeah.
So what they're saying is that, he kupu atete ki te kawanatanga. Ko koe te mea e tohu ana I ngā hoia kia oka eke nā paihana. Nei korea ke te kawanatanga, ko korea ke te hoia.
Ana.
So things such as that.
Rawi. Yeah.
Wehe mai ana te ringa I te kani, mā te waikura e tiro.
Kuia.
You separate the hand from the saw and the saw goes rusty.
Yeah.
There's no action.
Ka poe ai, wari au he nā kōrero, he rawe he nā kōrero.
He rawe. Yeah. Ka hāngai pū te ringa mau I te kani, te kawanatanga.
Mai koera te kōrero a tuiti rau ko tohu ki ngā hoia, ne? It's sort of like saying, e hara ngā koutou te e. Hara ngā koutou te e. Nā te kāwana nā rātou koutou I to'u mai.
Well, he tino tohu tērā. I see that our board's gone, so he tino tohu kua tatu mai rā ki te pito wakamutunga o tō tātane hōtaka. Yes, we've gone overboard by about a quarter of an hour, but we did start 5 minutes late, so not too bad, not too bad. Mihi ka wake rā ki koutou anō, and I hope you got something out of tonight's kōrero, and that you're able to recount some of this kōrero maybe next time you're doing your studies, or next time you're standing up, or doing a wai kōrero me I karanga anō hoki, and just be probably reminded or remind yourself of the origins of that kōrero and how you can relate it to something contemporary, making it relative. Well, not enough from me, and I gather it's enough from the boys as well. Tēnā koe Hemi, Mr. Jimmy James, mihi ka wake and all I see punas on there as well. You're up late tonight. You mustn't be going to work tomorrow. But thank you very much for taking time and watching in tonight. And remind our whānau that each Wednesday from 8 to 9, 9:15ish, we will be broadcasting this. And thank you very much once again to Te Kore Mako, giving us the opportunity to share on this platform. No reira, tohua tupua nuku, tohua tupua rangirangi Aotearoa, papahaha ro aupiki iau eke autu au rongo marae ro e tau, rongo tau tangata mātua e rarau. E rongo he wakari a ki rongo tūturu, wakamaua kia tīna. Hui e.
Tai ki e.
Kia ora mai tātou.